Wyoming Territory, December 1878. Zane Hawthorne believed the frontier was no place for softness. At 25, he had learned that hard truth watching his parents' loving marriage end when Comanche raiders left him orphaned at 16. Love made you vulnerable, gave you something to lose. Better to ride alone, work the cattle drives, and keep your heart as frozen as the mountain passes in winter. That philosophy had kept him alive through 9 brutal frontier years. The blizzard hit without warning as he rode through the Medicine Bow Range, returning to his small ranch outside Rawlins. Snow descended in thick curtains, transforming the familiar trail into a white void. His horse, a sturdy buckskin named Ranger, fought against the wind, ice crystals forming on his muzzle. Zane pulled his coat tighter, his young face stinging from the cold despite the wool scarf wrapped around his neck. He was considering finding shelter among the pines when he saw something that made him rein Ranger to a halt. A dark shape lay crumpled against a snowbank, barely visible through the swirling white. His first instinct was to keep riding. Getting involved meant complications, and complications out here could get you killed, but something about the shape troubled him. As Ranger stepped closer, Zane's breath caught. It was a woman dressed in white, her body shaking violently from the cold. He dismounted fast, his boots crunching through the snow. She wore a wedding dress of all impossible things, the fine satin already soaked through and freezing against her skin. Her lips had turned blue, and her dark brown hair had come loose from its pins, spreading across the snow like spilled ink. She could not have been more than 22 years old, with delicate features that even near frozen could not hide. "Ma'am," he shook her shoulder gently. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing hazel eyes glazed with hypothermia. She tried to speak, but only a whimper escaped. Zane cursed under his breath. He should leave her. This screamed trouble. A woman in a wedding dress, alone in a blizzard. Nothing good could come from this story. But even as his mind calculated the risks, his hands were already moving, shrugging out of his heavy coat and wrapping it around her trembling frame. "I have got you," he heard himself say, the words foreign on his tongue. He had not taken care of anyone since his parents died. "Can you ride?" She managed the smallest shake of her head. Her whole body convulsed with shivers so violent they looked painful. Zane made a decision he knew he would probably regret. He lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt, how fragile. He secured her on Ranger's saddle before mounting behind her, pulling her back against his chest and wrapping both arms around her to share what warmth he could. "Stay with me," he said into her ear as he urged Ranger forward into the storm. "My ranch is not far, just stay conscious." She did not answer, but he felt her nestle closer, seeking his heat like a dying ember seeking kindling. The ride took 30 minutes that felt like hours, his entire focus on keeping them both in the saddle, on finding the path, on the shallow rise and fall of her breathing. When the dark outline of his cabin finally emerged through the snow, relief flooded him. He had built the place himself 2 years ago, a simple 2-room structure but solid, with a good fireplace and a barn for Ranger. He got the horse secured first, then carried the woman inside. The cabin was cold, but not like outside. Zane laid her on his bed and worked quickly, building up the fire until flames roared in the hearth. He filled a kettle with water from his supply barrel and hung it over the fire, then turned back to the woman. She had stopped shivering. That was worse. He had seen hypothermia before. When they stopped shaking, they were close to the end. "No, you do not," he muttered, pulling off her wet shoes. The wedding dress would have to come off too, or she would die in it. He grabbed one of his flannel shirts and a pair of long underwear from his trunk, then hesitated. Improper did not begin to cover this situation. But propriety meant nothing to Death. He worked efficiently, eyes averted as much as practical, peeling away the soaked satin and replacing it with his dry clothes. They hung loose on her smaller frame, but they were warm. He wrapped her in his 2 blankets and then his bedroll for good measure, tucking them tight. "Come on," he said, chafing her hands between his. "Come back." Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on his face with effort. "Cold," she whispered. "I know you are warming up now, just stay awake." He poured hot water into a cup and added some whiskey from his small supply, then helped her sit up enough to drink. She coughed at the burn but swallowed, and he watched color slowly return to her cheeks. "What is your name?" he asked, keeping her talking, keeping her conscious. "Meredith," she managed, her voice hoarse. "Meredith Whitmore." "Meredith." "I am Zane Hawthorne, you are safe now." The words surprised him. When had he started offering safety? He was a man who barely kept himself alive season to season. "What happened to you?" Her eyes filled with tears that spilled over, tracking down her pale cheeks. "I ran. From your wedding." She nodded, a sob catching in her throat. I could not marry him." Zane felt something twist in his chest, an unfamiliar protectiveness. Anyone who lets his bride end up alone in a blizzard does not deserve her anyway. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, though they were strangers. Or perhaps just the intimacy that comes from being vulnerable before another person, stripped down to your most desperate self. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not leaving me there." He should have. Every instinct he had spent 9 years honing told him this woman was exactly the kind of complication he had sworn to avoid. But looking at her now, wrapped in his clothes and his blankets in his bed, hazel eyes fixed on him like he was something heroic instead of just a lonely cowboy trying to survive the winter, he could not bring himself to wish her gone. "Get some rest," he said gruffly, standing. "We will figure out the rest tomorrow." He turned away to give her privacy, busying himself with stoking the fire and checking his supplies. The storm howled outside, and he knew they would be snowed in for at least a day or two, trapped in his small cabin with a runaway bride who was already working cracks into the walls he had built around his heart. Behind him, he heard her breathing slow and deepen as sleep claimed her. Zane sat down in his only chair and stared into the fire, wondering what he had gotten himself into and why some traitorous part of him was glad she had stumbled into his path. Morning came gray and cold. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a world transformed into an ocean of white. Zane woke in his chair, neck stiff, and looked immediately to the bed. Meredith still slept, her dark hair spread across his pillow, her face peaceful in rest. In the soft morning light, he could see she was beautiful, breathtakingly so, and younger than he had first thought, perhaps just 21. He stepped outside to check on Ranger and gather more firewood. The snow came up to his knees, and the path to town would be impassable for days. They truly were stuck here together. Something about that thought did not disturb him as much as it should. When he returned, arms loaded with split logs, she was awake and sitting up in bed, the blankets clutched to her chest. She watched him with wary eyes as he fed the fire. "How are you feeling?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral, non-threatening. "Warmer, alive, thanks to you." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I need to explain." "You do not owe me anything." "I owe you my life." Her voice was stronger today, educated and refined. Eastern, maybe, or at least not frontier-bred. "The man I was supposed to marry, Cyrus Blackwell, he is a wealthy rancher outside Rawlins. Our marriage was arranged by my father, who has business dealings with him. I arrived from Boston 2 weeks ago and met Cyrus for the first time." She said the name with such revulsion that Zane's hands clenched. "He is not a good man," she continued. "I learned things, heard his ranch hands talking when they thought I could not hear. He is cruel to those who work for him and to the woman he was married to before me. She died last year under suspicious circumstances. I tried to tell my father, but he would not listen. He said I was being a nervous bride, inventing excuses." "So you ran on your wedding day?" She nodded, misery in her eyes. "I took a horse and just rode. I had no plan, nowhere to go. I just knew I could not stand at that altar. The horse threw me when the storm hit. I do not remember much after that until you found me." Zane absorbed this, his jaw tight. He knew the name Cyrus Blackwell. The man ran one of the largest ranches in the territory, built on questionable land claims and even more questionable treatment of homesteaders who got in his way. He had never met the man personally, but his reputation was dark. "He will come looking for you," Zane said. "He will not let a bride just disappear." Fear flashed across her face. "I know. But I would rather die in the snow than be his wife." The words hung in the cold air between them. Zane stood and paced to the window, looking out at the endless white. His mind worked through the problem with the same careful logic he used to track cattle or predict weather. Blackwell had money and men. Meredith had nothing but the wedding dress currently drying by the fire. And Zane had his small ranch, his horse, and a hardscrabble life that left little room for complications. The smart thing would be to send her on her way as soon as the snow cleared. Point her toward Laramie or Cheyenne, give her enough money for a stage ticket east, and let her disappear back into the life she came from. But when he turned back and saw her sitting in his bed, swimming in his clothes, looking at him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had betrayed her, he knew he would not do the smart thing. "You can stay until the storm clears and you are stronger," he heard himself say. "After that, we will figure out what comes next." The relief on her face was painful to witness. "Thank you, Zane." "Truly." The way she said his name did something to him, made it sound like more than just a collection of sounds. He turned away quickly, busying himself with making breakfast. "Are you hungry?" Starving. He cooked bacon and eggs, simple fare but filling, and they ate in surprisingly comfortable silence. She watched him move around the cabin with interest, taking in the sparse furnishings, the neat organization, the life of a man who had grown accustomed to solitude. How long have you lived here? She asked. 2 years in this cabin, 9 years in the territory. Do you have family? No, the word came out harder than he intended. He softened his tone. My parents died when I was 16. Comanche raid, I have been on my own since. Her eyes filled with sympathy he did not want. I am sorry. He shrugged, uncomfortable. It was a long time ago. And you have been alone all that time. Mostly. I worked cattle drives, ranch hand jobs, saved up enough to file a claim and build this place. It is not much, but it is mine. It seems like a lonely life. Her words struck too close to thoughts he had been having lately, especially as another winter closed in. Nights alone in the cabin, days with no voice but his own, seasons bleeding into each other with nothing to mark them but the change of weather and the cycle of work. Lonely is safe, he said, the truth slipping out before he could stop it. Meredith set down her plate and looked at him with those hazel eyes that seemed to see too much. Is it, though, or is it just slow dying instead of fast? The question rattled him, shook something loose in his chest. Before he could formulate an answer, a sound outside made them both freeze. Horses, multiple horses, their hoofbeats muffled by the snow but unmistakable. Meredith's face went white. They found me. Zane moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. 4 men on horseback approached through the snow, led by someone he recognized. Roy Tanner, one of Blackwell's foremen, a hard man known for doing his boss's dirty work. Stay in the back room, Zane ordered quietly. Do not make a sound. They will search the cabin. Not without cause they will not. This is my property, now go. She obeyed, disappearing into the small bedroom and easing the door shut. Zane took a breath, composed his face into careful neutrality, and opened the front door just as the men reached his porch. Can I help you, gentlemen? He asked, blocking the doorway with his body. Roy Tanner looked down from his horse, his weathered face hostile. We are looking for a woman, young, dark hair, last seen wearing a wedding dress. You seen anyone like that? Zane kept his expression mildly curious. A woman in a wedding dress out in that blizzard, she would be dead by now. Maybe, maybe not. Mind if we look around? I mind. Zane's voice went cold. This is private property. You have no authority to search it. Tanner's hand moved toward the gun at his hip. Mr. Blackwell is missing his bride. He is not in a patient mood. We can do this easy or hard. Zane did not move, did not let his eyes flicker to his own gun hanging by the door. You draw on me on my own land, and it is you who will have problems. I have done nothing wrong. I have seen no woman. The trail was impassable yesterday. No one could have made it out this way. The lie came smooth, necessary. Tanner studied him, trying to decide if he was bluffing. The other 3 men shifted in their saddles, hands near their weapons. The moment stretched taut as wire. Finally, Tanner spat in the snow. If we find out you are lying, it will go bad for you. Blackwell has a long reach. Then I guess it is good I am telling the truth. Zane held his ground until the men turned their horses and rode away, disappearing back into the white landscape. Only when they were truly gone did he allow himself to breathe again, his heart hammering. He turned to find Meredith in the bedroom doorway, her face pale. That was dangerous. You could have been hurt. They are gone for now. But he is right about one thing. Blackwell will not stop looking. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly small. I should leave. I am putting you at risk. And go where? He moved closer, surprising himself. You have nowhere to run, no money, no protection. Blackwell would find you in a day. Then what do I do? Zane looked at this woman who had crashed into his solitary life like a meteor from heaven, and felt the walls around his heart groan under sudden pressure. She needed protection. She needed someone willing to stand between her and a powerful man. She needed exactly what he had spent 9 years refusing to be. I need to think, he said. For now, you stay here, stay hidden. We will figure this out. Over the next 2 days, as the snow slowly began to melt, Zane found his careful solitude completely upended. Meredith was not content to hide in the bedroom. She helped him cook, mended a tear in his shirt with neat, efficient stitches, and talked to him as he did his chores. She told him about Boston, about her childhood and her father's business, about feeling like a commodity sold to the highest bidder. She spoke of her mother, dead 5 years now, and how everything changed after that. and despite himself, Zane talked back. He told her about his parents, about the ranch they were building before the raid, about learning to survive alone in a hard land. He told her about the cattle drives and the wild towns, about narrow escapes and hard winters. He told her things he had never spoken aloud because there had been no one to listen. She listened like his words mattered. She laughed at his dry observations and gasped at the dangerous moments and looked at him like he was interesting, like his life meant something beyond mere survival. On the third morning, Zane woke to find her cooking breakfast, her dark hair braided down her back, humming something soft and melodic. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the planes of her face and making her glow. Something in his chest cracked, a fissure in the ice he had encased his heart in. "I could get used to this," she said, catching him watching. Then she blushed as if realizing how that sounded. "I mean having someone to cook for, not being alone." "I know what you meant." He sat at the table, accepting the plate she handed him. "I could too. Get used to it." Their eyes met and the air between them shifted, grew charged with possibility. She smiled, tentative but real, and Zane felt himself smile back. When had he last smiled like this, genuine and unguarded? But reality intruded as it always did on the frontier. After breakfast, Zane rode into town for supplies, leaving Meredith hidden in the cabin with strict instructions to stay inside. Rawlins was a rough town of false-fronted buildings and muddy streets, and news traveled fast. In the general store, he heard the talk immediately. Cyrus Blackwell's bride had vanished on their wedding day. $50 reward for information leading to her recovery. Some folks whispered she must be dead, frozen in the storm. Others speculated she had run off with a lover. Blackwell himself was in a fury, they said, tearing the countryside apart looking for her. Zane kept his head down and bought his supplies, but as he loaded them onto his horse, a voice stopped him cold. "Zane Hawthorne, that is a name I have not heard in a while." He turned to see a man leaning against the hitching post, well-dressed and confident. Samuel Morrison, a lawyer he had known briefly years ago. "A decent man, rare in these parts. Sam, been a while." "Indeed, how is that ranch of yours?" "Surviving." Morrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I heard you might have come across something valuable in that blizzard 3 days ago." "Or someone." Zane's hand moved toward his gun, but Morrison raised his hands peacefully. "Easy. I am not here for Blackwell. I am here for my conscience. That girl he was marrying, Meredith Whitmore, she came to my office 2 days before the wedding. Asked me about her legal options. There were not many. Her father signed a contract. She was essentially sold." "That is not legal." "It should not be, but Blackwell has judges in his pocket." "I told her the only way out was to not show up, to disappear completely. I also told her she would need help, protection." He looked meaningfully at Zane. "I am not saying she is with you. But if a man like you happened to be helping someone like her, I would tell that man to be very careful. Blackwell does not forgive, and he does not let go of what he considers his." "Why are you telling me this?" Morrison's face hardened. "Because Blackwell's first wife came to me too, about 6 months before she died. Same story, same questions. I did not help her. I told her to make the best of her situation. 3 months later, she fell down the stairs and broke her neck." He met Zane's eyes. "I will not make that mistake twice." Zane absorbed this, his gut churning. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that if a certain young woman wanted to disappear legally, there are ways. Marriage to another man would nullify her father's contract. It would make her the legal responsibility of her husband instead. Blackwell could not touch her without committing a crime against another man's property." He grimaced at the word. "I hate the law sometimes, but those are the facts. You are talking about a marriage of convenience. I am talking about survival. You think about it if the situation were to arise." Morrison tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Zane standing in the cold street, his mind reeling. Marriage, the word carried weight, permanence, the exact opposite of his carefully solitary life. It meant vulnerability, attachment, something to lose. It meant becoming the very thing he had sworn never to be again, someone whose happiness depended on another person's survival. But it also meant Meredith would be safe, protected by law, not just by his gun and his determination. She could start over, build a new life, free from Blackwell's reach. The question was whether Zane could offer that without losing himself in the process. Whether his heart, frozen for so long, could thaw without breaking. He rode home slowly, taking a long route to make sure he was not followed. When he arrived, Meredith rushed out to help him unload, relief bright on her face. "I was worried," she admitted, "when you were gone so long." I ran into someone, a lawyer named Morrison. He knew you, said you came to him before the wedding. Her face flushed. I was desperate. I thought maybe there was a legal way out. He said there was not. He told me something different today. Zane carried the supplies inside, then turned to face her. He said if you married someone else, Blackwell could not claim you. The contract with your father would be void. Meredith stared at him, understanding dawning slowly. You mean a marriage of convenience? A legal arrangement. Something like that. She moved to the window, looking out at the mountains in the distance. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. And where would I find someone willing to do that for me? To tie himself to a stranger, make himself a target of Blackwell's anger, for nothing in return. Zane crossed to stand beside her, his heart beating too fast. Maybe not for nothing. She turned to him, eyes wide. I have been alone a long time, he said, the words coming rough and unpracticed. Told myself it was better that way, safer. Then you showed up and turned everything sideways. These past few days, having you here, talking to you, listening to you laugh at my terrible jokes, I have been happier than I can remember being. Maybe that makes me a fool. Maybe I will regret this. But if you need someone to marry you, to protect you, I am offering. Zane, his name came out breathless. You do not know me, you would be risking everything. I know you ran into a blizzard rather than marry a cruel man. I know you are brave and kind and stubborn. I know I sleep better with you in my cabin than I ever did alone. Maybe that is enough to start with. She looked up at him, and he saw tears glimmering in her hazel eyes. You would do this for me? The honest answer was more complicated than yes. He would do it for her, but also for himself. For the first time in 9 years, he wanted something more than survival. He wanted mornings waking up to her humming, evenings talking by the fire, the simple comfort of another heartbeat sharing his space. He wanted to matter to someone and have them matter back. I would, he said simply. Meredith reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. Then I have a confession. These 3 days with you, I have felt safer and more seen than in all my 21 years before. I have felt like a person, not a possession. If this marriage would be just a legal arrangement to you, I would accept gratefully. But you should know, she took a shaky breath, my feelings would not be just legal. The admission hung between them, fragile and brave. Zane covered her hand with his, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. Neither would mine. She smiled then, radiant and real, and rose on her toes to kiss him properly. Her lips were soft, tentative, asking a question. He answered by pulling her closer, one arm around her waist, the other cradling her head. The kiss deepened, sweet and searching, full of promise and possibility. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Meredith laughed. Is this how frontier proposals usually go? I have no idea. I have never done this before. Neither have I, not really. The first one did not count. She sobered slightly. Are we really doing this? If you are willing, we ride to Laramie tomorrow. Get married there where Blackwell has less influence. Then we come back here and start our life. Our life, she repeated, wonder in her voice. I like the sound of that. They spent the evening planning, practical and giddy by turns. Zane explained what life on his ranch would be like, the hard work and long hours, the isolation in winter and the constant struggle to make the land pay. Meredith listened seriously, then told him about the skills she had, the bookkeeping and reading, the way she could make a small budget stretch, the medicines her mother taught her to prepare. We will be partners, she said firmly. I will not be a burden. I never thought you would be. That night Zane gave her the bed as he had each night, and made his own bedroll by the fire. But before he settled down, she called softly from the darkness. Zane, thank you for saving me, for seeing me, for offering me a future. Thank you for stumbling into my path, he answered, for turning my life upside down in the best way possible. He heard her soft laugh, then the quiet of her breathing as she drifted to sleep. Zane lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling, marveling at how completely his world had changed in 3 days. He had started this week as a solitary man convinced love was a weakness he could not afford. Now he was planning a marriage, a partnership, a life entwined with another. It should terrify him. Instead, he felt something that might have been hope. They left at dawn, riding double on Ranger. Laramie was a full day's journey, and Zane wanted to arrive before dark. Meredith sat in front of him in the saddle, wearing his spare clothes since her wedding dress was hardly practical. She fit against him perfectly, her back warm against his chest. The winter landscape spread around them, beautiful and harsh. They talked as they rode, sharing stories, learning each other. Meredith told him about books she loved, about wanting to see the ocean someday, about dreams she had put aside when her mother died and her father grew distant. Zane told her about cattle and weather signs, about the small pleasures of frontier life, about his plans to expand the ranch eventually, maybe raise horses. I would like that, she said. Horses are beautiful. So are you. She twisted to look at him, eyebrows raised. Was that Zane Hawthorne being romantic? Might have been. I am new at this. She laughed and settled back against him. You are doing fine. They were halfway to Laramie when riders appeared on the trail ahead. Zane's hand went immediately to his gun, but relaxed slightly when he recognized the lead rider. Jack Porter, a rancher whose land bordered his own, a fair man and one of the few Zane considered a friend. Zane, Jack called out, riding closer. He had two of his ranch hands with him, heading to Laramie. That is the plan. Jack's eyes moved to Meredith with open curiosity. And who is this? Meredith Whitmore, Zane said, deciding honesty was safer than lies with Jack. We are going to get married. Jack's eyes widened, then a slow grin spread across his weathered face. Well, I will be Zane Hawthorne, getting hitched. Never thought I would see the day. Congratulations. He tipped his hat to Meredith. You are getting a good man, miss. Stubborn and too serious by half, but good. Thank you, Meredith said, smiling. I think so, too. You might want to know, Jack continued, his expression turning serious. Cyrus Blackwell has men on every road out of Rawlins. They are stopping travelers, asking about a missing woman. You two might run into trouble. Zane's jaw tightened. We will handle it. I figured you might say that, which is why I am riding this direction anyway. Laramie is on my way, might as well travel together. The offer was clear. Protection in numbers, witness if things went badly, friendship in action. Zane nodded gratefully. Appreciate it, Jack. They rode together, the group of five making better time than Zane and Meredith alone. Jack kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling stories that made Meredith laugh and putting her at ease. Zane watched her interact with his friend, saw how naturally she fit into this world he had kept himself separate from for so long. The sun was lowering when they crested a rise and saw riders blocking the road ahead. 6 men, and Zane recognized Roy Tanner immediately. His stomach sank even as his mind raced through options. That is them, Meredith whispered, fear in her voice. Stay calm, we have numbers and we have Jack. Tanner rode forward as they approached, his eyes locking on Meredith with satisfaction. Well, looks like that $50 reward is mine. Miss Whitmore, Mr. Blackwell has been looking everywhere for you. Miss Whitmore is with me, Zane said evenly. We are heading to Laramie. I think not. The lady is promised to Mr. Blackwell. She needs to come with us. Jack Porter spoke up, his voice carrying authority. I do not see a ring on her finger, Tanner. I do not see any legal claim. Looks to me like a woman is free to ride where she pleases. Tanner's face darkened. Stay out of this, Porter. This is between Blackwell and his runaway bride. She is not his bride, Meredith said, finding her voice. I never married him. I never will. Your father signed a contract. My father does not own me. No one owns me. Big words for someone with no protection. Zane's voice went cold as winter ice. She has protection. She has me. Tanner laughed, harsh and mocking. You, a nobody with a scraggly ranch and no prospects, you think you can stand up to Cyrus Blackwell? If I have to. The moment balanced on a knife edge. Tanner's men outnumbered them slightly, but Jack and his ranch hands were seasoned, and the odds were close enough to make everyone cautious. Violence hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Then Jack spoke again, calm and measured. Tanner, think this through. You draw guns here, people die. Maybe you, maybe us, but definitely some. All over a woman who does not want to marry your boss. Is that really worth it? Because I guarantee if shooting starts, I will make sure you are the first to fall. Tanner's hand hovered near his gun, calculation in his eyes. Jack stared him down without flinching. Long seconds passed. Finally, Tanner spat in the dirt. This is not over. Blackwell will not let this go. Maybe he should learn too, Meredith said quietly. Maybe he should learn that women are not property to be claimed. Tanner glared at her with something ugly in his expression, but he jerked his horse's head around and rode away, his men following. They watched until the riders disappeared over the ridge. Jack let out a breath. That was close. Zane's heart was still hammering, adrenaline coursing through him. Meredith turned in the saddle and wrapped her arms around him, trembling. He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair. "It is all right," he murmured. "They are gone. He will send more, he will not stop. Then we make sure you are legally protected before he can. We ride hard for Laramie, get married tonight, and Blackwell can rage all he wants. You will be my wife, and that changes everything." They made Laramie as the sun set, the town's lights winking to life in the dusk. Jack escorted them straight to the home of Judge Harrison, a stern but fair man who Jack vouched for. The judge listened to their story with furrowed brows. "This is highly irregular," he said, "getting married to escape another marriage contract." "The contract was illegal," Zane argued. "She did not consent." "That may be, but Blackwell will fight this. He has lawyers' money. And she has me. Judge, I am asking you to do the right thing. Marry us tonight and make it legal." Judge Harrison looked between them, taking in their youth, their earnestness, the way they stood close together like two trees bracing against a storm. Finally he sighed, "All right, but you better mean this. Marriage is sacred, not a legal trick." "I mean it," Zane said, looking at Meredith, "every word." "So do I," she whispered. They were married in the judge's parlor, with Jack and his ranch hands as witnesses. Meredith wore borrowed clothes and had wind-blown hair, and Zane was dusty from the trail. But when they spoke their vows, looking into each other's eyes, it felt more real and true than any fancy ceremony could have been. "I, Zane Hawthorne, take you, Meredith Whitmore, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, stand with you, and build a life with you. I promise to see you always as the person you are, not what anyone else wants you to be." Tears streamed down her face as she replied, "I, Meredith Whitmore, take you, Zane Hawthorne, to be my husband. I promise to stand with you, work beside you, and share your life. I promise to bring light to your darkness and be your partner in all things." The judge pronounced them married, and Zane kissed his wife for the second time, this one sealed by law and witnessed by friends. Meredith kissed him back with joy and relief and something deeper, a promise of tomorrows. Jack insisted on buying them dinner at the hotel, a celebration that felt surreal after the tension of the day. They ate and drank, and Jack's ranch hands offered congratulations that seemed genuine. For a few hours, surrounded by friendly faces and warm food, they could almost forget the threat that loomed over them. But reality reasserted itself when they returned to the judge's house to collect their marriage certificate. A man waited on the porch, tall, gray-haired, impeccably dressed, Cyrus Blackwell himself. Zane stepped in front of Meredith instinctively, his hand on his gun. Jack and his men flanked them immediately. Blackwell studied them with cold calculation. "So, it is true. My bride ran off and married a nobody." "She is not your bride," Zane said. "She is my wife, legally married with witnesses and documents. You have no claim. Her father signed a contract. I paid good money. For a human being. Which is illegal, in case you forgot. Meredith is a free woman who made her own choice. You need to accept that." Blackwell's eyes moved to Meredith, and she lifted her chin, refusing to cower. "You disgust me," she said clearly. "I would rather die than be your wife. I know what you did to your first wife. I know what kind of man you are." Rage flashed across Blackwell's face. "You know nothing, you stupid girl." "I know enough, and now I am protected by law. Touch me, threaten me, and you commit a crime against my husband. He has witnesses. You cannot make me disappear like you did Sarah." The name of Blackwell's dead wife hung in the air. Jack stepped forward. "I think you should leave, Blackwell. You have no business here." Blackwell looked at the assembled group, at the judge watching from his doorway, at the public street with its witnesses. Calculation warred with fury in his expression. Finally, he smiled, cold and sharp. "Enjoy your little ranch, Hawthorne. It would be a shame if something happened to it. Winter fires can be so unpredictable. Threaten me again, and I will report you to the marshal. We have witnesses to that threat, too." For a long moment, Blackwell stared at him, weighing whether this young cowboy was truly worth the trouble. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on the wooden sidewalk. Only when he was gone did Zane allow himself to breathe again. Meredith sagged against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding tight. "Is it over?" she asked. "For now, he is not a fool. He will not risk a public fight he cannot win, but we need to be careful, watch our backs." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good." Zane stood up to him without backing down. "That takes guts. It takes having something worth fighting for." They stayed in Laramie that night, Jack insisting on paying for a room at the hotel. Zane and Meredith climbed the stairs together, suddenly aware this was their wedding night, aware of what that traditionally meant. Inside the room, they stood awkwardly, all the ease of the past days momentarily lost to nervousness. Meredith moved to the window, looking out at the dark street. "I know this marriage happened fast," she said quietly. "And for practical reasons. I do not expect you to, if you would rather wait until we know each other better, I would understand." Zane crossed to her, gently turning her to face him. "Meredith, I married you because you needed protection, yes, but also because in 3 days you made me feel more alive than I have in 9 years. Because I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just a legal arrangement. If you need time, I will wait, but do not think I do not want you, I do very much." She looked up at him, eyes searching his face. "I want you too. I was just afraid this was all obligation to you, that I trapped you into this. You did not trap me, you freed me, from loneliness, from the prison I built around my heart." He cupped her face in his hands. "I am exactly where I want to be." She kissed him then, standing on her toes to reach his lips, and this kiss was different from the others. This was claiming, choosing, promising. Zane lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bed, both of them laughing breathlessly. They loved each other slowly, learning each other's bodies with wonder and care. Zane had been with women before, brief transactions in cattle town saloons that left him empty. This was nothing like that. This was Meredith's hands tracing his scars and the muscles earned by hard work, her whispered words of affection and desire. This was him discovering what made her gasp and sigh, learning her curves and hollows, worshipping her with a devotion that surprised him with its intensity. Afterward they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her dark hair. "I love you," she said softly. "I know it is fast, maybe too fast, but I do." "I love you too," the words felt momentous, world-changing. "I did not think I would ever say that to anyone again, but here you are and here I am, and it is the truest thing I know." She tilted her head up to kiss him again, sweet and lingering. "What happens now?" "Now we go home. To our ranch, our life, we work the land, build our future together." "Together," she repeated, smiling. "I like that word." They returned to the ranch 3 days later, taking a cautious route and watching for trouble. But the trail was clear, and when the cabin came into view, Meredith laughed with delight. "It is home," she said, "really home now." The next weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. They worked side by side, preparing for the rest of winter, planning for spring. Meredith proved capable and hardworking, learning quickly and never complaining about the harsh conditions. She kept the cabin warm and organized, cooked meals that were better than anything Zane could have managed alone, and in the evenings they talked and read and slowly built the intimacy that made a marriage real. Zane found himself changing in ways he had not expected. He smiled more, laughed at her jokes, shared his thoughts without the careful guard he had maintained for years. She drew him out, made him remember the boy he had been before loss hardened him. In turn, he taught her the skills she needed to survive out here, how to shoot and ride better, how to read the weather and the land. They became partners in truth, each supporting the other. Winter deepened and they stayed snug in their cabin, the rest of the world distant. They heard no word from Blackwell, and Zane began to hope the man had accepted defeat. Jack Porter visited once, bringing supplies and news. He reported that Blackwell had returned to his ranch and seemed to be leaving them alone, though he remained bitter. "Keep your guard up," Jack advised. "Men like that do not forget." But the weeks passed peacefully, and spring arrived with a rush of meltwater and green shoots. Zane took Meredith around the ranch, showing her the land with pride, explaining his plans for expansion. She listened with genuine interest, offering ideas that were surprisingly practical. "You have a head for this," he said admiringly. "I told you I could be useful," she grinned at him. "You are stuck with me now. Best trap I ever walked into." They were checking the fence line one warm April day when riders approached. Zane tensed immediately, but relaxed when he recognized Jack Porter again. This time Jack had someone with him, a man in a marshal's badge. "Zane, Meredith," Jack called. "This is Marshal Davies from Cheyenne, he has news." The marshal dismounted, his expression serious but not hostile. "Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, I wanted to inform you personally. Cyrus Blackwell has been arrested." Shock rippled through Zane. "What?" "After your marriage, we started getting information. Seems your situation gave others courage to come forward." Ranch hands willing to testify about threats and violence, neighbors with stories about intimidation, and most importantly, new evidence about his first wife's death. She did not fall down those stairs, she was pushed. We have a witness now, a servant who was too afraid to speak before but saw what you did, standing up to him and found her courage. Meredith's hand found Zane's, gripping tight. Is he going to trial? He is. And with the testimony we have, I expect he will hang. I wanted you to know you are safe now, both of you. After the marshal and Jack left, Zane and Meredith stood in the spring sunshine, absorbing the news. The threat that had shadowed their early days was truly gone. They were free to build their life without looking over their shoulders. It is really over, Meredith whispered. Zane pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on her head. It is. And our life is just beginning. The years that followed proved him right. They worked the ranch together, slowly expanding as Zane had dreamed. Meredith proved to have a gift with horses, and they started breeding them alongside the cattle. The operation grew successful enough to hire a few hands, and their home became known as a fair place to work. 2 years after their wedding, Meredith gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Blackwell's first wife, a tribute to the woman whose story had helped bring justice. The baby had her mother's hazel eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and Zane discovered depths of love he had not known existed. He held his daughter in the doorway of their cabin one evening, watching Meredith tend the garden she had planted. The sight of them, his wife and his child, filled him with contentment so profound it was almost painful. Meredith looked up and caught him watching. What are you thinking? That I was wrong. All those years I thought being alone was safety. But this, you Sarah, our life, this is what safety really feels like. Coming home to people who love you, building something that matters. I was not living before, I was just surviving. She walked over and wrapped her arms around both of them. And now I am alive because of you. Because you were brave enough to run into a blizzard, and I was brave enough to stop when I saw you in the snow. Best rescue I ever needed. Best thanks I ever received. He kissed her softly, their daughter cooing between them. Thank you for turning my life upside down. Thank you for catching me when I fell. They stood together as the sun set over the mountains, a family born from a desperate moment and a brave choice. From a frozen girl in a wedding dress and a lonely cowboy who learned that love was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. The frontier spread around them, still harsh and beautiful but no longer lonely, never lonely again. Inside the warm cabin the fire crackled, and outside their land stretched to the horizon. Zane Hawthorne, who had once believed he was safer alone, now knew the truth. The frontier was no place for solitude. It was a place for partnership, for love that could weather any storm, for two hearts brave enough to build a life together against all odds. And as he looked at his wife and daughter, at the home they had created, Zane knew with absolute certainty that he had found everything he never knew he needed. The young cowboy who rescued a shivering bride from the snow had himself been rescued in return, pulled from his own frozen isolation into a life full of warmth and love and purpose. Their story was complete, their happy ending assured, their future bright with possibility. Together, they had tamed their little piece of the wild frontier, not through force but through devotion, and built a legacy that would endure for generations. It was more than Zane had ever dared to dream, and it all began with a choice to stop in a blizzard, to offer help when he could have ridden away, to open his heart when he had spent years keeping it closed. In the end, that was the greatest truth of all. Sometimes salvation comes not from staying safe and separate, but from taking the risk, extending the hand, opening the door. Sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. And sometimes a shivering bride in the snow and a lonely cowboy are exactly what each other needs to find their way home.